All right. Welcome to the Voice of Freeport. I guess we didn't really give this a name, so let's just call it the Voice of Freeport. I'm Nick Nunez. Obviously, as some of you know, I'm with the Voice of Freeport. Here also with Farah Tulu Honoree. Did I say that right?
Honorary, but yeah, close enough.
Sorry. Also, somebody who's been doing some writing for the Voice of Freeport, and an exceptionally intelligent woman, in my opinion. Also, we have former candidate for state representative John Cook, who ran against Andrew Chesney. We're going to get his thoughts on a lot of things here in this next hour or so. We want to start off, though, with Farah, who has a topic she wanted to start out with, which is involving money in politics and Citizens United. So, Farah, if you want to kick off the conversation with that, we can go from there.
Yeah, so today we do have a variety of different topics we want to look into, but we do want to start off here talking about money in politics. And in my opinion, we really can't talk about money in politics without talking about campaign financing, and especially Citizens United, which is a Supreme Court case in 2010. So I'm going to start off with just the facts of the case briefly. It was a 5-4 rule with the conservative majority, with the majority opinion here, the liberals of the court with the dissenting. What this case did is that it allows for unlimited campaign donations to political broadcasts, or in other words, advertising, political advertising. And the majority here decided that this unlimited corporate donations are protected under the First Amendment, citing free speech. And they said that the First Amendment applies no less because the free speech is from a corporation, given that political donations are a form of free speech. So there's been a lot of negative impacts of this, but I do want to discuss from like a more progressive standpoint why I personally have disliked that ruling. Something that I've never seen in literature on this Supreme Court case is that in a way it gives a corporation personhood. So by citing free speech under the First Amendment, that it applies to a corporation, it's in a way indirectly saying that a corporation qualifies for civil liberties that protect the constituency, the American public. And I don't think the problem necessarily is with giving personhood to a non-human entity necessarily. We've seen countries throughout the world do stuff like that, especially in regard to rivers and lakes. For example, the Ganges River in India was so polluted that the Indian government gave it personhood. It's also known as environmental personhood to protect it from corporations dumping waste and whatnot into it. But what is concerning to me about indirectly giving personhood to a corporation and giving it the same rights that people have is that it almost implies that the corporation is being exploited and that its rights are being taken away as if it had the same natural rights as an American citizen does, when in fact the corporation is the one doing the exploiting. Like we see big tech and African nations using child labor to mine cobalt to build the devices we're using to have this Zoom call today, or the sweatshops in Southeast Asia, or Amazon in the United States, who wouldn't even pay for personal protective equipment for their employees during a pandemic. But as far as the impact goes, it really just does give the elite that much more power and influence in our elections. Their interests will always be pushed to the centerpiece now. Candidates rely on their big dollars for their campaign financing, and you cannot win re-election without advertising. And that's become the largest expense of a campaign. I'm sure John will be able to speak on that later on, as have been a former candidate. And so the people's interests are lost. Candidates care more about how can I win re-election and getting the money to raise for my re-election attempts than listening to their constituency who don't have the means to donate millions of dollars. For example, in 2010, dark money, which is untraceable spending, the source of the money is a secret, started in 2010 at $310 million, I want to say, approximately. And by 2018, it was at 1.1 billion. That just shows just the vast impact of this. If anyone is interested in learning more about this, I recommend The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills. He's an American sociologist. And we also see this too in just Freeport. Andrew Chesney's dad donated $60,000, almost $60,000 to his campaign, and just a local state election. It's really troubling to me. Super PACs didn't really exist before this. Now these super PACs have the capacity to basically decide who wins an election. So I'm going to now open the floor up to you guys and see, John, as being a former candidate and have been on the campaign trail, how has this shaped your campaigns?
My turn?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, my name is John Cook. Pleasure to be here with you guys this morning, and I'm really thankful that somebody's interested in even putting this kind of information out in Freeport. My campaign was kind of a spur of the moment because it was a result of a court case, a federal court case. And I pretty well knew, I needed to collect a certain amount of money. And when that didn't happen, it was hard. You can't compete, put it that way. I really didn't get to run the campaign I wanted. However, I'm happy with the campaign I did run. I would have hated to go into the voting booth and not see my name there, knowing that it could have been there and not knowing what would have happened. So you're disappointed in that respect. But again, it's a hard year to try to solicit donations from people that don't really have any money. I was only able to raise about $3,000, and almost a third of that was my own money. So I had one campaign contribution for $1,000, and that was my largest campaign contribution, and then a couple for a few hundred, and then a lot for 25 and 50s. But I'm grateful for them all. Money in politics, it's real. One of the problems I see too is our media is all a corporate commercial media. So they're only interested in political candidates if you have money to spend. 50 years ago, once I got my name on the ballot, I would have had every radio station, every little town newspaper, at least asking me if I was a communist or what I was. What are you doing? Who are you? Oh, what are you about? Nowadays, the first media outlet to reach out to me was a TV station in the Quad Cities 2 weeks after I was on the ballot. The next news media to reach out to me was the Dubuque Telegraph-Herald in Iowa. No local media reached out to me at all without me reaching out to them first. Oh, I take that back. The Journal Standard did reach out to me and Chesney about 3 weeks before the election, and then they confused our pictures. They didn't know who. So I mean that's really pathetic. And you had Today in the Port who just completely ignored that there was even an election. And whether I'm running or not, the people deserve. Everybody gets smarter when there's some kind of a debate or an argument over ideals and ideas. And so I really feel that the citizens of Freeport, the residents of the 89th district, really got shortchanged in the aspect of they really didn't know what was going on. Even I think it's Eric Wilson of Channel 23, is that his name, that runs the State Line Quiz Bowl. He mentioned the 89th district on election night is out by Freeport, completely oblivious of the fact that Western Winnebago County is the 89th district. So to me, that's just terribly sad. So, any questions exactly?
I just think it's interesting. just listen, so I was obviously around town as Farah was, throughout this election process. And it's unfortunate to hear $3,000 isn't nothing, right? But when you're up against people who can donate $60,000 in one shot, it's hard to imagine how you overcome something like that, because when I drive around Freeport, I saw John Cook signs all over the place. There are absolutely people in this town, and most of the people that I spoke to about that particular election, were supporters of yours. Which, I feel like if it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Farah, but if it wasn't for Citizens United, an independent candidate would be able to get a lot further in the process. Because I think when I went, I think the last time I looked, I think did you get 5%? Was that,
Me?
is that accurate? Yeah.
No, I got about 30%.
Oh, you did? Okay. So I looked way early. That's my bad.
Carroll County, I really got killed in Carroll County. You could tell I didn't get down there. Down there, I got less than 1,000 votes. I only got 17%. Joe Davis County, I did about 35%. And I thought I would do better in Stevenson County than I did. And I haven't seen Ogle County because they haven't released their whole results because they had that snafu in the 90th district state race where they didn't have results for a while.
Well, and when you don't have the resources to compete with big money on the other side, especially in the two major parties, it seems like it's almost impossible for an independent to make it anywhere, which is really, really unfortunate, because I feel like there's so many more ideas out there than just the ideas that we get from the two parties. I think that's obvious. And if it wasn't for, like Farah said, all of the dark money and treating corporations as citizens, I think people like you, independents, people outside of the two-party system would have a much better shot, and should have a much better shot. If we're to have a real free marketplace of ideas, which I don't think we can say we have right now because of all of the money in politics.
Democracy is about ideas, bringing the best idea to the forefront. And exactly right, with corporations being people and they can donate as much money as they want, it's really ridiculous. We're not getting the best ideas. We're getting, and as a politician too, if again, running for state representative, if you're going to run in 2 years from now, or even representative to Congress, you got to be thinking about campaigning. You got to be spending time with the people that are going to give you the money, not the people that need your assistance. Right. And so again, the people that need the help the most and need the most attention are not getting it. The people that don't need it and have resources are the ones getting the attention.
And they don't even know that there are better ideas or even other ideas out there, because nobody has the money to put them to the public, which shouldn't be the issue.
And again, corporate media is about selling you products, not ideas. Most of the time, they're not about your insight as much as they are about, you need a new truck, Nick.
Right. I mean, unless it's an idea that obviously benefits the corporation, then they're all about ideas.
Yeah, if you don't have that D or an R behind your name, nobody knows who you are. If you don't have the support too of a major party, you don't get the PAC benefits from that association. Nonprofits, for example, with Citizens United, are not required to disclose donors. And nonprofits is such a vague term. The NRA is considered a nonprofit. It's like these interest groups who have a lot more on their mind, or they have a lot more resources to achieve their interests than you and me do. It's just horrible to think about that our democracy is controlled by such a remote handful of individuals.
It doesn't really seem like democracy, does it?
No.
No, not at all.
And and I don't know, Farah, is there a realistic path to defeating Citizens United?
So yes and no. Um, the best possible way to go about this would be simply overruling Citizens United. But right now we have a conservative majority on the Supreme Court, which is really unlikely. So what we've come to is political candidates such as Andrew Yang. He ran as a Democrat, but he was unique. He had a lot different ideas than establishment Democratic candidates. For example, he campaigned on this idea of democracy dollars. So every eligible or every registered voter would receive $100 from the federal government every year. And we could use this money to donate to any political candidate or campaign that we chose. But it's not a perfect situation. However, for example, America already has low voter turnout as it is. But Andrew Yang insisted that he did the math and we'd only require about 30% of the American electorate to use their democracy dollars to then cancel out the corporate dollars. But then we run into a problem with what's going to stop corporations from them advertising to people how to use their dollars. So it's like this full circle we've come to where it's like this never ending cycle. And then, of course, we could regulate how corporations advertise or try to persuade the public to use their democracy dollars. But then who's going to stop those regulations from then becoming another Supreme Court case in which the Supreme Court decides, oh, under the President of Citizens United and the First Amendment, the corporations then have the right to try to persuade the public with how to use democracy dollars.
Well, they also have the right
really
to democracy. Would they not also have the right to democracy dollars? I mean, if they're considered citizens, then wouldn't the federal government be giving money to corporations that don't need it to give,
So yes and no, I think, because it's not official really that a corporation has a personhood status. This is sort of my own interpretation of what presidents of court cases and laws have done. But with this logic, then it could be, I guess I could see that though.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Andrew Yang, because I'm just for my own personal gratification, I guess. I was an Andrew Yang supporter. Obviously, when it comes to the national elections, I'm happy with the outcome. I don't think that this is just sort of an aside for me, but I don't think that Biden was the ideal candidate. Andrew Yang was my guy. I thought he had the best ideas. I still have a Humanity First sticker on my car. And nobody else is really talking about what we're going to do about automation. Nobody else was really talking about UBI until he did. So I hope that he stays in the arena. But that aside, drew a blank on what I was going to say next.
Andrew Yang is interesting because he said not right, not left, but forward. And he actually did gain a significant Republican following, which I thought was incredibly interesting. I've spoken to many conservatives who support UBI, interestingly enough. They see it, though, as a way to sort of cut back on welfare programs, food stamps, housing, things like that. Whereas I think most liberals see it as more of an addition to that. But still, the fact that we have found this common ground, that we both see UBI as a next plausible step, is really fascinating to me.
I think that may have actually hurt him too, though. There are people who are, really far left. When they start to see a Democrat candidate getting support from people on the right, they then get a sour taste in their mouth, right? I think the same thing happened with Tulsi Gabbard, who I think is incredibly qualified. But people on the right started listening to her, and they liked her, and so the left decided she wasn't left enough. Again, another aside for me on the national side. To get back to more of the local politics, unless you had anything else you wanted to say about Citizens United, I wanted to move on and talk a little bit about something that I don't think a lot of people in the area really understand and should, and that's home rule. So John, I've talked to John. John, I've talked to you about home rule before. It's a pretty complex issue. You know, it's not something that I could, okay, I had a conversation with John Cook about this, so now I can explain it to everybody. That is certainly not the case. So if you wouldn't mind, if you could give a little bit of an overview of what home rule is and let people know what that means to them, especially here in Freeport.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Home rule came about with the adoption of the 1970 Constitution, and it's a constitutional clause in Illinois that gives every municipality over 25,000 home rule powers. And the idea is basically good, and as it allows them to kind of govern themselves outside of state statute. However, Illinois policy is very liberal, but as long as it pertains to the government and affairs, the city of Freeport can basically do anything they want. However, I give this example. It would be, it required any action by a unit of local government requires authorization from the state in the form of a statute. That's what keeps the park district from building a rocket ship to the moon, because they don't have authorization to do that. Okay, so the village of Lena, they don't have authorization to ban cats and dogs. Therefore, they can't do it. The state of Illinois does not give them a tool to do that. The city of Freeport, if they want to ban cats and dogs, it's well within their right. They can do that. They do not need an authorizing statute from the state of Illinois. So it actually frees them from state obligations in most all areas. The city of Freeport did not really practice home rule until the adoption of the 1992 city code that we have today. Prior to that, most every statute, I got the 1977 Freeport code here, and like I'll just use the library statute as an example here. The library, you get down to the end of the library ordinances, and it says statutory conflict. No provision of this chapter of the Freeport Municipal Code shall be construed as being in conflict with sections 1.1 through 5.8, inclusive of the Illinois revised statutes. If any such conflict exists, the conflicting provisions of the chapter of the Freeport Municipal Code shall be separable and void, meaning Illinois statutes were superior. With the rewrite of the 1992 city code, they added administrative code 20205B, which says, I believe I have it up here on my computer, the city code, 20205B, any conflict between city ordinance and state statute, city ordinance shall prevail. You know, so now at the end of the library code, it says that if there's a conflict between the city of Freeport's ordinances and state law, city ordinances will prevail. The problem with that is right out here in little old Freeport, Illinois, we don't have a lot of experience at how best to manage and run libraries. The state of Illinois has experience since 1873. You know, that's what got us in all the trouble when we built the new library using home rule, is sometimes we don't realize what happens when we go outside state statute until we go outside state statutes and have consequences. If you understand what I mean. People a lot of times think laws are really silly and stuff until they understand the reason they're there. Most all laws resulted from something happening like that. So, but here in Freeport, home rule has been a get out of jail free card since 1992. That's when they passed the food and beverage tax. That's when they passed the real estate transfer tax. A lot of people don't realize that, but if you buy a house in Freeport and you go to sell that house, there's a real estate transfer tax that you have to pay. And I can look that up. I got a lot of information here. I don't have it all right in front of me. and I guess I don't even have that right in front of me, but there is a percentage that you have to pay. The state of Illinois has since taken that right away from home rule municipalities. Now, if you want to pass the real estate, the realtors lobby got to the General Assembly and says now, if a municipality in Illinois, a home rule municipality wants to pass a real estate transfer tax, they have to have a referendum. The state came in and preempted. That's what's called a preemption, when the state of Illinois preempts home rule powers. I've long been on our local representatives here that we need more preemptions. There's no debt limit for municipalities. The city of Freeport, it's astronomical, the debt limit that they have right now. If they were non-home rule, they'd be limited to 8 point some percent of their equalized assessed value. You know, it's like me in a household, if I don't have a debt limit, I'm in real trouble. You know, or if I exercise, if I act like I don't have a debt limit. And I did want to make clear that if, anything that I state is a fact, let me know if you want to question me on it. Most of my references are come from if you can see that home rule and intergovernmental conflict and agreement. It's a continuing legal education book written by Kurt Freilich. He's been bond counsel sometimes for the city of Freeport on some of our bigger home rule bond issues. Again, the city of Freeport just borrowed $55 million earlier this year. No notice to the public, no published notice, no public hearing. They did not even have to tell the Stevenson County Board or other affected taxing districts, because they all share in the overlapping bond debt, that they were borrowing $55 million. I think this is far too liberal of a policy when it comes to borrowing money I haven't even earned yet. We haven't even earned that money, and the city of Freeport is spending it. We need more say so. We at least need notice. So I've been along. I'm not necessarily. I'm against home rule the way it's been used in Freeport. Again, it's a get out of jail free card. Any question?
And I just want to mention on the recent borrowing of the $55 million, that this is, you know, what it's technically for. I don't know, you know, how. I don't know how the city, I don't know who enforces making sure that the city spends this money on what they say they're going to, but that's a whole, you know, other thing that I need to research. But they borrowed that $55 million for police and fire pensions. And I spoke to one of the aldermen about this, and he told me that, and I don't want to put anybody out there, so I'm not going to name his name, but he told me that that this was the best option to avoid kicking the can down the road, those were the words he used. And I thought that was strange, because this seems a lot like kicking the can down the road. To borrow money for these obligations that you have, you know, in an uncertain economy. It seems like, you know, what they did allows them to now deal with this later, which is what this councilman says this was supposed to avoid. So it's a very complex issue. I have pages of notes on that I could get into, but I'm not going to, because it'll make my head hurt. But again, another thing that a lot of people who live in Freeport just simply don't know about, because like you said, there was no public notice, there was no public hearing. You know, I know about it because I spent all summer in city council meetings, in board meetings, finance meetings, and all this stuff for the Voice of Freeport. That's why I know about it. You know about it because of your interests in city issues and home rule and all that stuff, but most people wouldn't know. And it's not like it's up for a vote.
Most lawyers don't know.
I mean, this could affect people's, you know, what people pay for their, you know, if I'm not mistaken, this can affect what people are going to pay for their property taxes, but they don't even know it's happening.
I would say most of the time, the aldermen don't realize, and sometimes the mayor might not even realize, when the city manager is using home rule authority. There was just recently where they changed the way the library board members are appointed by the mayor. before they followed home rule, before they followed state statute completely. But the way they were appointed, where I think there was 2 of them appointed every 4 years or whatever, so they were revolving, so they weren't ever appointed in the same administration. Now I think that they changed that ordinance so that they serve at the mayor's pleasure. Well, how do we operate our library? Is it by state statute or is it by local ordinance? You know, it can't be arbitrary. We get ripped off when it's like that. And most of the aldermen and probably the mayor probably didn't even understand what that difference means. Again, it's real easy to just run this stuff right over the top of everybody's head and nobody knows any different. And anybody that's asking questions is standing in the background waving their arms, but by the time it's way down the road, the ball's way down the road. And that 55 million, Nick, let's go back to Administrative Code 20205B, because it does not matter one iota what the city of Freeport told you that money is going to be used for. Because again, under home rule power, they can, anytime they rewrite their ordinances, anytime the new ordinance is what rules. Let me go here to 20205A and I'll read it to you. I'm sorry, a little bit of a getting to it here.
You're all good.
Okay. A, if the provisions of different codes, chapters, or sections of the codified ordinances conflict or contravene each other, the provisions bearing the latest passage date shall prevail. Meaning if they don't like an ordinance that they wrote last month, they'll rewrite an ordinance this month and then that ordinance is done. Therefore, they're not even bound by the home rule units aren't even bound by their own ordinances. I mean, it's really just governed by the latest committee. So, I mean, again, this stuff has bothered me, for a long, long time. But again, there's no media to put it out here. A lot of people, it makes their head hurt when they think about it. Even, Rockford did away with home rule in 1983. Loves Park just became home rule, and so did Belvedere. But again, these units, they don't understand the vast power that comes with it yet. Freeport understands the vast power and have exploited that power, I think, to the expense of our citizens. We didn't even have all these fees on our water bill have only came about in the last 20 years. The first fee was in 2000, the stormwater fee for $2. And now look at it. Again, and if most people, if those fees, those expenses were put on property taxes, the vast majority of Freeport households would pay less money. Why should people that live in Marvin Lane with a 6-car garage and 4 manhole covers in front of their house pay the same utility fees as somebody lives in the 3rd ward that shares a manhole cover with 5-6 other residences? I mean, there's a fixed cost to infrastructure, and those that have the most rely the most, need the most infrastructure, generally speaking.
I have a question. Sorry about that. I know this was on the ballot in Winnebago County this year. Is this something that's become a partisan issue, or how does that work? How is it interpreted, home rule?
Home rule wasn't on the ballot in Winnebago County. The executive form of county government was, which if you want to be a home rule county, you need the executive form of county government. But I don't think Winnebago County was going to go that way. Any county can become a home rule unit by referendum, which Rockford has tried to reinstitute home rule a couple of times. They did have a referendum, I believe, about 2 years ago, and it failed to reinstate it. I would think, and I said back then that if Rockford wanted home rule, I would rather see Winnebago County have home rule, because with the county, you have a lot more units of local government within that county, keeping an eye on what the county is doing. Here in the city of Freeport, they do whatever they want to, and no other buddy is really looking at them. Or if they are, they're just kind of, okay, go about your own business. So, and the General Assembly can step in. They can, but chances are most of the time they're just kind of hands off local units of government, especially too when we've got representatives that are probably benefiting from some of the local tax codes and some of the local tax breaks that we have. I mean, our state senator is a huge property owner so in a TIF district even. Now it's not legally permissible for a city representative to own property in a TIF district, but yet I guess our state representatives can. So anyway, that was it, kind of sidetracked there.
And we were talking about Stewart, right?
Yeah. And another thing too, I think is kind of funny. And why is it that the regional school superintendent now is running from Stewart? You know, for years, the regional school superintendent was in Stockton, which is more centrally located when you look at Stevenson, Joe Davis, and Carroll County. Every place is close to Stockton in that 3-county area. Well, now the regional school superintendent, which is an elected position, has moved the regional office from Stockton to Stewart's building, the former Journal Standard building at State and Main. So, you know, conflict, I don't know. I work for a company that says that if it appears to be a conflict of interest, it is, and we don't do it. So obviously that don't apply to local representatives.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is a conflict of interest. I just always thought that it was, I think to the normal person, it seems a little odd that our county board and all of the different, you know, boards and you know, that exist within that, they all meet at the Stewart Center, and maybe that's, you know, and maybe there's nothing there. It just always struck me as a little strange that, you know, the governing body of the county, you know, being in bed with this very rich politician who owns a lot of property around here. And like I said, maybe that's, you know, maybe that's my conspiratorial brain working.
I think it's a legitimate concern to wonder where our interest of our state senator lies. You know, when it comes to local government, is it making sure that he gets his rent paid, or is it making sure that the county serves its citizens? You know what I mean? So I think that the division of a conflict is real. I mean, certainly I would be conflicted if it came between getting paid rent or serving my constituents. Money is a huge conflict with most everything. That's why you have to, you know, you have to state what you owe for property and everything when you run for office. But again, most people don't look into that. You know, when has any local media pulled, you know, Brian Stewart's statement of economic interest and not only read it, but shared it with the public? You know, a lot of this, you know, and a lot of this campaign finance and everything comes back down to media. You know, that was a question I was thinking about. How do I reach the people, the same people in Scales Mounds and Mount Carroll, as Kalita, Illinois? You know, even right here in this little area, media is so fragmented nowadays. You know, yes, you have Facebook, but not everybody's on Facebook. Some people just ignore it. Again, it's, you know, it's a really tough situation sometimes in how to actually educate the people on what's important for them to know. So that's always been kind of one of my things when I started writing in 1992 is, you know, is I really wanted to teach people something. And in order to do that, I had to know something. Nobody's interested, nor should they be, in what I think. You know, people should be interested in what I know. And if I only talk about what I know, a lot of times I don't have a lot to say. So that's all.
But and it's certainly true that you know, so for me, example, me knowing how much you know, that does then add credence to what you think, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you've taken the time to educate yourself, so now your opinion matters to me, right?
Yeah, yes, and most of the time, even in my job at work, I won't express my opinion unless I explain why I came to it, how I came to learn this. So most of the time, it's just easier for me to keep my mouth shut, because you know what? Nobody's interested in how the landing gear of a plane works until it doesn't work. Even the flight engineer isn't reading the landing gear manual until it doesn't work. And then everybody wants to know. And then sometimes it's not an answer that you can just, again, I have to get the book out and study a little bit. A lot of times I just can't come up with the, you know, what I'd love to, you know, but that's just not how life works.
Right. And I think this definitely, again, shows or refers back to our previous conversation about money in politics. I mean, the connection between money and our elected officials is just undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
Locally, I think locally is a huge problem too. Is, you know, you have John Zajac. You know, he'll be funding everybody again this year. Everybody who he wants to win. You know, he's a huge property owner in Freeport. Does that money come with strings? Well, how can it not, is what I would say. If somebody would have wrote me a check for $20,000 in my campaign, I would have had a real hard time blowing them off, even if it was something I didn't necessarily agree with. Just because when you become dependent on somebody, you become subservient to a degree, and that's just not good for democracy.
And it gets to I just want to say it gets to this point where it's like these people who are donating to campaigns, the people who can afford to donate 20, 40, $60,000, they, in their minds, they're paying for a service, right? And that's not how this is supposed to work. If you're winning an election, then if you're running for office, you're running, which you're supposed to be running to represent your constituents, not to represent whoever wrote you the biggest check. But that's what a lot of these people expect from you. And you listen to, some people in Congress who will tell you, they absolutely hate how much time they have to spend on the phone asking people for money, because if they don't, they can't get anything done. They can't get reelected to get anything done. And it just seems like, the money in politics is really, it seems to be the root of a lot of different problems. Almost any facet of our government, of politics that we could get into a discussion about, you can almost always draw a line back to money in politics. And that was, why I had posed the question, what is the, true, path to defeating that? And it's something that it's interesting. This, Supreme Court can decide on something like Citizens United, like that. And now it's the law of the land. It could take decades to undo that. And in those decades, a lot of damage is going to be done. And it's just really, really unfortunate. Farah, anything else you wanted to get into?
Yeah, just briefly, I just think it's interesting that locally, our local politics is almost microcosmic of what's happening on the federal level. I mean, we see the same patterns occur here that are occurring in our national government. And I know you were talking about John Zajac. He donated over $5,000 to Andrew Chesney's campaign.
Yeah. I wish I had about 10 or 15 people that could just write me a $5,000 check and then just ignore me. Because most of the people, they're going to want, like you said, they're going to want a service for that kind of money. People look at the billionaire that spent all the money just to defeat the fair tax. I mean, here he would have paid. They figured it out that he would have paid he'd have paid less in taxes for 5 years over the next 5 years than he did to defeat that. So he was expecting something for that money he spent. He wasn't just throwing it in there just to enlighten the public on the morals of this constitutional amendment. So, and that's the thing too, is so many First Amendment rights, so many First Amendment cases have been about commercial speech and not political speech. Defend commercial speech at all costs. And who's that benefit? Again, corporate media. There's been very few cases that actually about political speech. Most of it is about political speech. So, and that's a key difference there that few people think about. Well, is that speech political, or is it, or is it not? Is it just First Amendment stuff? Everybody has a right. Everybody has a right to say it. It just doesn't mean anybody's ever going to publish it or anybody's ever going to hear it. But the government can't prosecute you for whatever you want to say. But again, local too, and I think too, the lack of any real media or any real cohesive media in Freeport is a big reason why our voter turnout will be so much less than in the general election. You can pretty well bet that it'll be about 20%, if that, of what voted in the general election. Why is that? And that benefits the people that are sitting down there now. The less people talk about it, the perception of happiness exists. Nobody's interested in running. Nobody even knows hardly that right now is the time to turn in petitions. That should, again, there's just so much that people around here could, need to know. and don't know, in my opinion. And I don't care if they agree with me or not, but everybody needs to, should have a good idea what's really going on in town. And we're poor as a church mouse. We have to be in Freeport. I mean, look at our roads.
Yeah. And just on voter turnout, I hope I'm not misspeaking. I might have these numbers a little bit off, but some people watching may have read over the summer an article that Nick Welch put out. Nick Welch, who's hasn't been involved with the Voice of Freeport recently, as he's back at school, but I believe the number that he had put out, and I had a conversation with him about it, was I think it was about 9% of the city voted for, in the mayoral election for, Jody Miller was elected by 9% of the city.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's about, it's either 9% of the city voted or 9% of the city voted for her. I'm not sure exactly which is which, but either way, it's incredibly low turnout. And then the person who, has, the most donors, which for some reason usually ends up to be whoever's on the right, ends up winning out. And, you have this, people who are supporters of that administration, they'll say like, well, this is the city voted, this is the will of the people. Well, is it? Because most people didn't vote. And that's a huge issue locally that I really think that we need to try to work on, is getting people to get out and vote, because we can't have the policies that we want in this city if nobody's going out to vote except for the people who have, financial interest in who wins the election.
Right. And if, along with money, when we have a city that predominantly only conservatives are running for election, then we have an incumbent privilege that favors conservative and Republican candidates.
One thing too, I would like a lot of people to understand is anybody can run for office down there and should. I think everybody should experience at least one time running for a local office. I mean, the experience is great. You learn a lot. It takes you places you would never go before. And if you read, some people tell me, well, they're not smart enough. They don't know enough. I tell them, if you read the material that they put in front of you, you will know more than most of the people sitting down there. That's one of my greatest frustrations, is calling some of these people on the phone sometimes, and they don't have any idea of what I'm talking about, and they're the ones going to be voting on it. I've had that with bond issues. I've had that with big issues where, well, I'll have to review that. Well, wait a second. You know what I mean? And again, too, if people want to run, it's got to be more than a status symbol, or more than just a societal event to go to a meeting and to get seen on camera. And
Mm-hmm.
It just is. It's more than getting your name in the paper. We need people that will really think about the stuff, think about the ramifications. I mean, just the stuff that's happening in Freeport right now. I see, look at there on the east side of Freeport, with all the money that got spent for nature trails. Over there, the continuation over the Pecatonica Prairie Path that doesn't go anywhere. We don't have a way across Route 20, the bypass. We don't have a way across the Pecatonica River out there. Meanwhile, they can't plow the sidewalks crossing the railroad tracks on Stevenson Street. You know what I'm saying? We seem to have money for transportation projects that nobody's going to utilize for commerce, yet the transportation that we need for commerce goes unattended. So, sorry.
And we have money for things like, brand new benches downtown for all of the people who sit on benches downtown, wherever they may be. But we don't, but most of the roads in this town, you have to drive in zigzags to not, destroy your suspension. But we're spending money on, and so we're going to be wrapping up here in a little bit, but before I forget, I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, which was, you had mentioned how much the water bills have increased in the last 20 years. I just wanted to mention in the last 10 years, I moved here in December of 2010. So exactly 10 years ago, I moved here. And when I moved here, my water bill, one person in a, you know, in a one bedroom thing that the word is escaping me right now, but apartment that I had, my water bill was $20. You know, it was nothing. And over the course of a few years, it skyrocketed up to 60, 70, 80. Now we have all this capital improvement. And it just it makes you wonder, you know, how are we spending all of this money on projects that we don't need, like you were just talking about, you know, benches downtown, and we're all paying into this capital improvement fund, but we can barely drive on our roads. It just absolutely boggles my mind.
One of my big problems with it is I kind of mentioned earlier, it's a reverse Robin Hood. But I live, my address is 1310 West Stover. Anybody can drive by it. It's out there. It's an undersized lot, you know, nice small house, but it's an undersized lot. A lot of people's garages out on the west end of Freeport wouldn't fit on my lot. I'm single. I wouldn't have to put my garbage out except for once a month, you know, because I eat all natural. I don't have much garbage. So I'm trying to live my life as frugal as possible, yet I can't do it. You know, because I'm being charged for everybody else's stuff. You know, you talked about living in an apartment. Why should a house that has 4 apartments in it pay for, you know what I mean, pay for those big utilities when there's, you know, there's houses. Again, I'm going to go out to, you know, behind Crate Park there. That great big house when you're driving up on Flagstaff Hill over there, that house won't fit on most Freeport lots. That house is paying the exact same fees for infrastructure, for roads, that you are. Now, if I'm paying $2 or $4 for a stormwater fee for my square footage, they ought to be paying about 60 or 70, just because they're going to produce a lot more rainwater. They're going to produce a lot more. And again, for sanitary sewer, every 500 feet, you have to have a manhole cover. Out there, you got such big property, you got 2 or 3 manhole covers, you know, sanitary sewer to maintain and to service per residence. You get in your poor parts of town, you know, you're servicing a lot of different residents and sometimes apartments on one manhole cover. It's, you know, infrastructure.
And they're paying the same.
Yes, they're paying exactly the same. If you could, this is another problem that I have with them too, but is doing away with the Water and Sewer Commission. We had a Water and Sewer Commission. Well, City Administrator Crow did away with that. That's a whole backstory behind that, but I won't get into that. I think we need that there because, again, we need to make sure anything we pay for water and sewer is kept separate. We can't, you know, that's a public utility. You know, it can't be, you know, being commingled with everything else. And again, there's not enough people looking at that. But if they would do an overlay map, I was after the Water and Sewer Commission when it existed. We could be after the city council now, do an overlay map of these fees, so the capital improvement fee, the stormwater fee, and look at where they're all coming, where the vast majority of the money is coming from. It's coming right out of the poorest part of Freeport. And most of those people that are affected don't have an idea because nobody's here to tell them. So, and that's really the biggest thing I've had wrong with that. If they would put that on property taxes, if that would go on property taxes, most people would pay less. But who doesn't want it on property taxes? John Zajac and your landlords. Because then, you know, then it would be, that's another problem too. Why should a temporary renter, why should somebody that lives in East Dubuque that's living in Freeport for 2 years going to Highland, why should they pay for the infrastructure for their landlord? That is a cost that should be on property taxes because infrastructure for capital improvements is a direct benefit to property owners, not temporary lessees or renters. You know, again, I'm kind of opinionated on this, but I've studied this for years, and I just think it's a valid concern. Taxation and the mechanics of taxation is a huge issue, and it should be for the public at large.
Anything to add, Farah?
No, I think that is a good place to wrap it up. And thank you so much, John, for joining us today.
Anytime. I really.
Oh, go ahead.
I really appreciate the opportunity. You know, I'm more of a writer. I don't like getting out in front of. I'm more of an introvert. but I do well in front of the public and everything, but I'm always grateful. That's one reason why I ran for office, is because it puts me out in situations I wouldn't be in otherwise. And sometimes, you don't experience real personal growth until you get a little uncomfortable sometimes. And so I enjoy doing this sort of thing, and I'm really grateful to you two for giving me the opportunity. And I hope we can do it again sometime. That's all.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to. You're a treasure trove of information, and I think one of the biggest problems that we have in Freeport is just people not being informed, and so I think we'll definitely be talking to you again, and this has been great. So I appreciate it. So I guess that's going to be it for us. Again, I'm Nick Nunez with the Voice of Freeport. Farah, I can't tell if you're frozen. I think you might be frozen. So, hey, I guess I'll end it there. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Yep, bye.